to the news from the Real World Podcast. I'm Quinn.
I'm Jess.
I'm Jody.
This segment we're starting off with a little tale from the National Theater, a Sam Mendes production.
Tell us the tale.
This is from theguardian.com. It is a student pick by Ben Beaumont Thomas, entitled "Actor Loses Voice on Stage During Sam Mendes' King Lear." So basically, the actor playing Edmund in this production of King Lear that's going on at the National, starring Simon Russell Beale as Lear, he mid-speech lost his voice in the first half of the show before intermission, and basically the actors had to improvise around it to fill in like the narrative gaps because he suddenly couldn't talk, and then the second half, the understudy, who I guess just graduated from Guildhall, came in and took his place as Edmund, and Sam Mendes gave a curtain speech in between saying, "Hey, we have a new actor playing Edmund." So yeah, what'd you think?
I wish I could have been
Actor's
there.
nightmare.
I wish I could have seen
I would have been
it.
so interested to see how they mimed everything around him to get the story told.
Yeah.
Because
If he could talk, he'd be saying this.
this is the stage manager's nightmare,
Pretty big
right?
part, too,
I'm supposed to maintain the artistic integrity of what's going on stage, and yet not be amused or entertained by it. I'm supposed to just have no opinion and report, right? And how?
Oh, that never happens.
I love stuff like this as an audience member because suddenly the listening goes way up among the ensemble because something's really happening and they're really having to deal with it. And I love watching actors have to solve a problem like that on stage.
When I'm stage managing, I get so excited and so proud of my actors when it's like something happens, they have to work through it, and you sit in the booth and you're like, yes, yes, and you're like cheering them all on, and you're like, I can't do anything to help you, but you're doing great.
Smart actors.
I like seeing understudies. Every once in a while I'll go to the theater and an understudy will be announced, and I feel like, oh, well, everybody's really listening now. They don't know what's going to happen and it's going to be different.
Yeah.
I know, this is my worst nightmare as a stage manager too, is I'll be sitting there on headset calling cues and all of a sudden, nothing. And then what do you do? I was really sick. I had bronchitis during a performance once that I was calling, and I started having a coughing fit. And luckily the light booth and the stage manager's booth were attached, and the door was open between. And all of a sudden, I just see the light board operator's head pop back through the doorway and look at me and go, I have. And I was like, and he just started taking all the cues on his own because I literally couldn't talk.
Smartboard off.
Amazing. Well,
Terrifying.
R. Mark Cowie says, although it's a bit sadistic, I do enjoy watching actors have mishaps like this on stage. I mean, it's never fun in live theater when things go wrong and everyone has to scramble to figure out what to do, but the solutions, I think, are always fantastic. I totally agree with you, R. Mark Cowie. Moving on, national tours. We go from the National Theater to national tours.
Well, when last we met, we were discussing national tours.
Yeah.
exciting!
Was Kinky Boots and Newsies. This article is basically just a dumbed down version of the New York Times article we were talking about last week. It's just explaining that not all tours go out as full production contracts, and that there are these tiers, and the tiers basically exist because full production contracts are so expensive, not only for the producers but also for the housing or the local venues and the houses that are bringing them in. So you pay so much up front, and if you can't afford it, well, you don't get the tour. And so a lot of tours were losing venues because the venues couldn't afford to bring the tours in.
Right.
So they came up with these tiered contracts so that they cost less money to not only produce but also to host. And so they were able to, I think between 2000 and 2004, they lost 40% of their 1 week venues because they just couldn't afford it anymore. And then they introduced these tiered contracts, and they won 90% of that back.
Wow.
So
That's
it's
good.
doing
pretty good.
They're doing what they were meant to do, but everyone's up in arms because shows as big as Newsies and Kinky Boots are going out as Tier C and Tier D. At least that's what they've been introduced as at the auditions for the tours. The final contract hasn't come out yet, so we don't know for sure that they're a C and a D, but that's what they're being advertised as right now.
Well, they really pinched pennies now on these tours. I know I don't know if they actually implemented this, but for a while they were considering taking out the British dialects in Billy Elliot because A, you didn't have to hire a dialect coach, and B, I guess they thought it would play better for Middle America, but I don't see how you do that show without
the British
that dialect, you know. That
I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't
I
that
hadn't heard that.
terrible?
Just to take one person off the road. I guess the
Yeah.
cost of having one person on the road is expensive, but
Sure.
still.
I mean,
Sure.
you don't really travel with your dialect coach. That's the kind of person you fly out every couple of weeks. To
Yeah,
check
yeah,
in,
that's what
so.
they do.
I guess
But
that's true.
it's a
It's still an
recurring
expense.
expense. You know, all those kids that they pump into those roles. they
Well,
have to
actually, isn't
teach.
it? And then you don't have to get as skilled actors, right, or dancers, or performers, let's say, because you don't have to get ones that can do it.
I guess it opens up
it can
options,
affect that.
but it's depressing.
Yeah. Well, John Clay III says, it doesn't make sense to me that Newsies and Kinky Boots National Tour company members are making significantly less than Book of Mormon members. Kinky Boots is a Tony Award-winning musical, and Newsies is a Disney musical. Tiers C and D, those company members are working extremely hard and deserve more. And you are probably right, but at least the show is going out on the road.
Yeah.
At least
So-
it's getting people work.
People are getting work, and people are coming to see theater, and in the end, that's
disagree
what
with either of those.
commercial theater is about.
Yeah.
So there's this new housing complex.
So we've gone from national theater, national tours to local.
Yeah.
I like the play.
Macro
the
down to
play.
the micro.
All right, so this is an article called "Housing for Artists in Arts District to set to break ground in May." It's an editor pick from Front Row Blog by Peter Simic. Anyway, so basically the gist of this article was in Dallas, Texas. There's been some conversation, and now it's going to happen. There's housing districted to be for artists, and it's going to be compensated by the state.
And there's arts lofts that they're
Yeah,
building
arts-
in the arts district.
Arts lofts, and I found this article really interesting, and I was mildly confused by it because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting! I want to live there. I want to move to Dallas just so I can live there.
But
Artist
then
housing.
they're like,
is
there's
compensated.
nothing happening there.
They're saying there's nothing happening, and there's only 40 slots, and are we even going to get 36 applications for these 40 slots? And I'm like, what?
And there's
then,
not a bar or
Yeah,
a grocery
there's-
store.
I thought that was
There's no
funny.
grocery store
Well,
there.
what I thought was funny about that is, what are the local amenities? A grocery store, a bar. I love how those were like the first two necessary.
Yeah, food
We
and
are
beer.
artists,
Food
so.
and beer. That's what we need.
Well, no, I think the other interesting point that the article brought up was about the amenities of the facility itself, such as large door access, vent hoods, provisions for chemicals, all hours noise, like what kinds of
For,
special
painters
permissions,
and
yeah, for
stuff.
artists are
Yeah.
necessary. And then there was the standard kind of, well, what is an artist, and if you apply, how do you gauge the legitimacy of their claim to artistry, and it'll be judged by a panel of peers, but that's probably just as arbitrary as like whoever these artists are.
Well, there's a number of buildings in New York, a few that have artist subsidized housing to them, and it's like they look at your income taxes every year, and then they just take a percentage that becomes your rent for the year.
We know of a stage manager. We know of a stage manager who lives in one of those houses.
I have
So
a
she's
good friend
considered-
who's on the
She's been under
43rd
rent
Street
control
one.
for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So more power to her.
Yeah, good for them. Good. Artist housing, good.
I
Just
like
you gotta
it.
move to
I like
Dallas,
it.
and apparently there's no bar or grocery store.
That's a problem. Albert Cisneros says, these complexes remind me of a sort of utopian society that will never work. Hopefully there is more hope for these artists. Oh, that was very interesting.
There you go.
Interesting.
Perspective.
Yeah.
But it kind of like
Interesting
matches the tone of the article, though.
That's
true.
Utopian. Well, that ends this week's News from the Real World podcast. Join us next week. It's been nice having you. I'm Quinn.
I'm Jess.
I'm Jody.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Oh.
Welcome back to the News from the Real World.
Whoa,
I'm
hold
chewing
on.
gum.
You just jumped right in there.
I did.